The night was quiet, the kind of stillness that makes every creak of wood and hum of electricity feel louder than they should. Nathaniel Hale sat by his window, staring at the flickering street lamp outside. It wasn't insomnia that kept him awake, though he'd been sleepless more times than he cared to count. It was the noise, voices that didn't belong to anyone in the room, voices he couldn't shut out no matter how hard he tried. He used to think he was losing his mind, some cruel trick of his imagination. But the longer it went on, the more he realized it was real. He could hear something no one else could. He could hear people's final thoughts, the last whispers of their minds before they left this world forever. The first time it happened, he was 17. He was on the bus home from school, sitting by the window, half dozing to the rhythm of the ride. Beside him, an old man clutched a paper bag filled with groceries, his hands trembling slightly. Nathaniel wasn't paying him much attention until the voice broke into his head, clear and soft as though the man had whispered directly in his ear. I wish I had told her I loved her one more time. Nathaniel turned sharply, startled, staring at the old man. But the man's lips hadn't moved. He was just staring out the window, pale, almost resigned. Nathaniel opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, the man slumped forward. The groceries spilled, rolling across the floor, apples thudding against the bus aisle. People screamed. The bus driver pulled over. Nathaniel sat frozen, his chest tight, because he knew what he had heard. That was no random thought. That was the man's last. For weeks afterward, Nathaniel told himself it was coincidence, his imagination filling in the silence. But it happened again. And again. By the time he was 25, he had no doubt left. It wasn't voices of the living he heard. It was the dying. Now at 30, he carried the burden like a second skin. He couldn't predict who it would be, couldn't choose when the thoughts came. Sometimes he'd go days in peace, but then suddenly in the middle of grocery shopping, in a park, on the subway, he would hear it, the final plea, the regret, the flash of memory that clung to someone in their last moment. That he poured himself a glass of water and rubbed his temple, trying to calm the ache behind his eyes. Tonight had been worse than usual. Earlier in the evening, as he walked home, he passed a woman in her 30s waiting at the crosswalk. She had been smiling, talking on the phone, and then, like a bell ringing too loudly, her thought struck him. Please let my kids be okay without me. Nathaniel's heart lurched. He turned just in time to see the screech of headlights, the blur of a car running a red light. She was hit before he could even shout. Her phone clattered to the ground, her voice cut mid-laugh. He stood paralyzed, helpless as people ran to her side, calling for help, crying out. But he knew before the sirens came. He had heard her last words. Nathaniel set the glass down with shaking hands. He wanted to save them, every single one. But he couldn't. The voices came too close to the end, too sudden for him to act. It was like being cursed to witness 1,000 deaths he couldn't prevent. That he leaned back in the chair, closing his eyes. Sometimes he wondered why him. What cosmic joke had chosen him to bear this? He wasn't a doctor, not a policeman, not anyone who could truly use this to help. He was just an ordinary man with an extraordinary curse. That night, sleep finally came in fragments, filled with dreams of voices fading into nothing, whispers that slipped through his fingers like smoke. The next morning, Nathaniel walked into his office building with heavy steps. He worked at a publishing house, quiet, unremarkable, where his biggest task was proofreading manuscripts that all blurred together after a while. He liked the monotony. It kept his mind occupied, kept him from listening too hard. The less he thought about his ability, the less it seemed to haunt him, but fate, it seemed, never let him rest for long. At lunchtime, he went out for a sandwich, choosing a small cafe tucked on the corner. The place was busy, chatter filling the air, the clinking of cups and silverware. Nathaniel waited in line, scanning the menu board when it hit him. A whisper, sharp and sudden, cutting through the noise. I hope someone finds my cat after I'm gone. His stomach dropped. He turned, eyes darting through the crowd. A man in his late 40s sat by the window, alone, sipping coffee. He looked fine. Healthy. But Nathaniel knew. His chest tightened. He debated what to do. Should he warn him? Tell him something, anything? But how could he explain it? Excuse me, sir, I can hear your final thought. You're about to die, they'd laugh, call him insane, maybe worse, still, his feet moved before he could think. He crossed to the man's table, forcing a smile. Hi, I'm sorry to bother you, but, you dropped this outside. He held out a napkin he'd grabbed, desperate for any excuse. The man blinked, startled. Oh. Thanks. He took the napkin, clearly confused. Nathaniel stood there awkwardly, his pulse hammering. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that could change fate. But then, before he could form the words, the man coughed suddenly, choking. His face turned red, then purple. The cafe erupted into chaos, people shouting for help. Someone tried the Heimlich, but it was too late. The man collapsed, his coffee spilling across the floor, dark liquid seeping into the cracks. Nathaniel stumbled back, his stomach lurching. He heard it, the thought echoing in his skull one last time, softer now. My cat, someone find her, then silence. Nathaniel pressed his hands to his ears as if that would block it out. But it never did. That night, he walked home in the rain, soaked through, his mind spiraling. How many more? How many voices would he hear before he broke entirely? He thought about telling someone, confiding in a friend, but what would they say? At best, they'd think he was delusional. At worst, they'd lock him away. So he carried it alone, but deep down, Nathaniel wondered if it was really just a curse. Because sometimes, rarely, he thought maybe, just maybe, it was a gift. He remembered one voice, years ago, that still lingered. A little boy in the hospital, frail and small, who had smiled at him as Nathaniel visited a sick relative. The thought that entered his head was simple, innocent. I'm not scared anymore. It had broken Nathaniel's heart, but in a way, it had given him peace, too. Some thoughts weren't regrets. Some were acceptance. Some were love. Maybe that was his purpose, not to change fate, but to witness it. To remember. To carry the words that would otherwise vanish, but Nathaniel didn't know that fate was about to test him in ways he couldn't imagine. Because soon, the voices wouldn't just be strangers. Soon, he would hear the final thoughts of someone he loved, and that would change everything. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, cars honking, people rushing, voices overlapping in a chorus of daily life. To most, it was ordinary background noise. To Nathaniel, it was cover, a shield to hide behind as he tried to blend in with the crowd. But no amount of chatter could protect him when the whispers came. He had learned to recognize the subtle shift. A faint pressure in his head, like the hush before a storm, and then it would arrive, a thought that didn't belong to him, heavy with finality. He dreaded it, but he couldn't stop it. The morning after the cafe incident, Nathaniel rode the subway to work. The train rocked gently, fluorescent lights buzzing above. He tried to distract himself by reading the newspaper, but the letters blurred before his eyes. His nerves were frayed, stretched too thin. He knew it would happen again. He just didn't know when. Across from him sat a young man in a suit, maybe 30, scrolling through his phone. His face was calm, almost bored. Then the whisper struck Nathaniel like ice water. I should have told her I forgave her. Nathaniel's grip on the paper tightened. His eyes darted to the man, panic rising. Was it about to happen here, in the middle of the crowded subway? Would the man collapse right in front of him? But nothing happened. The train screeched to the next stop, passengers shuffled in and out, and the young man kept scrolling. Nathaniel's heart pounded as he tried to make sense of it. Sometimes, the thoughts came seconds before death. Other times, minutes. He never knew how much time there was. When the man finally stood to leave, Nathaniel's instinct screamed at him. He jumped up, following him off the train, keeping a few paces behind. The young man walked briskly through the station, tapping at his phone, unaware of the shadow trailing him. Nathaniel's mind raced. Should he say something? Warn him? How? They emerged into the sunlight, the noise of the city swallowing them. The man crossed the street, and Nathaniel's stomach lurched as a delivery truck came barreling down, its horn blaring. The man froze, wide-eyed. Nathaniel didn't think. He lunged, grabbing the stranger's arm, yanking him back onto the curb just as the truck roared past. The man stumbled, nearly dropping his phone, staring at Nathaniel in shock. what the hell, he gasped. You weren't looking, Nathaniel stammered, breathless. Truck. The man glanced at the street, then back at him. His face softened with reluctant gratitude. Right. Thanks. Guess I owe you one. Nathaniel nodded quickly, stepping back. The young man walked away, shaking his head, muttering something about needing more sleep, but Nathaniel stood frozen, his chest tight. For the first time, he had changed it. He had heard a final thought and intervened. And the man was alive. A strange mix of exhilaration and dread surged through him. If he could save one, why not more? But how many? And at what cost? All day at work, the moment replayed in his mind. He barely noticed the manuscripts piling on his desk, the emails buzzing in his inbox. His thoughts spun with questions he couldn't answer. Was fate fixed, or could he bend it? Had he stolen that man from death, or only delayed it? That night, he walked home under the dim glow of street lamps, the air thick with drizzle. His head throbbed with exhaustion, but sleep was impossible. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, until finally he rose and paced the apartment. His reflection in the window looked back at him, haunted eyes, unshaven jaw, the face of a man carrying a secret too heavy for one soul. The days that followed were worse. The voices came more often, as though his choice to intervene had opened a floodgate. At the grocery store, I hope my daughter remembers me smiling. At the library, I should have finished that book. On the sidewalk, if only I hadn't lied. Each one pierced him, demanding action, but he couldn't save them all. He wasn't everywhere at once, wasn't fast enough, strong enough. He was just one man, and every time he failed, the guilt gnawed at him deeper. One evening, as the sun bled orange over the rooftops, Nathaniel found himself outside a small diner he had never visited before. Something pulled him inside, an intuition he couldn't explain. The place was nearly empty, a waitress wiping down tables while an elderly man sat at the counter sipping soup. Nathaniel slid into a booth, scanning the menu, when the voice came, I don't want to die alone. His eyes shot to the counter. The old man stirred his soup slowly, his shoulders hunched with the weight of years. Nathaniel's heart twisted. He couldn't let this one pass. Not again. That he stood, moving to the counter, sliding onto the stool beside the stranger. Cold night, huh? He said awkwardly. The man glanced at him, surprised, then chuckled softly. Colder than it used to be. Or maybe I'm just older. Nathaniel smiled faintly. They talked, about the weather, the city, nothing important. But as the conversation flowed, Nathaniel felt the heaviness in the air lift slightly. The old man laughed once, a genuine sound that seemed to echo in the quiet diner. When the man finally paid his bill and left, Nathaniel followed discreetly outside, watching as he shuffled down the street. For a moment, Nathaniel thought maybe, just maybe, he had made a difference. Then it happened. The man stumbled on the curb, his cane slipping. He fell, his chest tightening, hand clutching at his heart. Nathaniel rushed forward, catching him, shouting for help. But it was too late. The man's breath rattled, his eyes wide with fear. And then the whisper came, faint and fragile. Thank you, for not letting me be alone. Nathaniel's throat closed. He held the man until the light left his eyes, tears stinging his vision. That night, Nathaniel walked home hollow, the old man's final words echoing in his mind. For the first time, he wondered if saving someone wasn't always about keeping them alive. Maybe sometimes, it was simply about being there, but the line blurred, the questions grew heavier. If he could save one life, should he try? Nathaniel sat alone at his kitchen table, the clock ticking too loudly on the wall. The old man's whisper still lingered, weaving through his thoughts. Thank you, for not letting me be alone. It was meant to comfort, yet it hollowed him out. Every final thought he carried became a weight inside him, a burden that no one else could see. The phone buzzed on the table. His sister, Emily. He hesitated, then answered. Hey, Nat. You sound tired. I'm fine, he lied, pressing a hand against his temple. You always say that. Her voice softened. You should come by this weekend. The kids miss you. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Emily was one of the few people who made him feel grounded, tethered to something real. But he couldn't tell her the truth. How could he explain that he walked the city streets half mad with voices no one else heard? That every smile he saw was haunted by the question of how long it would last? "I'll try," he said quietly. "You'd better," she teased. "Love you. Love you too." When the call ended, Nathaniel sat there, staring at the blank wall. He couldn't shake the thought that one day, he might hear Emily's last words. The idea twisted in his gut, colder than anything he'd ever felt. Days blurred into weeks. The voices didn't stop. Nathaniel tried avoiding crowds, tried working from home, tried drowning it out with music. But the whispers cut through everything. Sometimes they came in the dead of night, as if echoing from across the city. Sometimes they came from strangers passing by on the street. He could never predict it. One evening, against his better judgment, Nathaniel agreed to meet an old friend for dinner. Jason had been his closest companion in college, someone who knew him before the whispers started. They hadn't seen each other in years. The restaurant was warm, filled with laughter and clinking glasses. Jason greeted him with a bear hug, grinning. "Man, you look like hell. What've you been doing, hiding in a cave?" Nathaniel forced a laugh. "Something like that." They talked over food, catching up on jobs, old classmates, memories that almost felt like another life. For a while, Nathaniel almost felt normal. Almost, and then it happened. Jason was telling a story, mid-laugh, when the whisper slid into Nathaniel's mind. "I wish I hadn't pushed her away." Nathaniel froze, his fork clattering against the plate. Jason's voice faded into background noise, replaced by the thundering of his own heartbeat. He stared at his friend, at the ease in his smile, the light in his eyes. But Nathaniel knew. He felt the same ice in his chest he always did when the end was near. "Hey," Jason said, frowning. "You okay?" Nathaniel forced a nod. "Yeah. Just, headache." He wanted to scream, to grab Jason by the shoulders and demand he tell him everything, who her was, what he regretted, why fate was about to steal him away. But what could he do? The thought meant it was too late. Dinner dragged on, every second thick with dread. When they finally parted outside, Jason clapped him on the back. "Don't disappear again, all right? We should do this more often." Nathaniel managed a smile, though his stomach was churning. He watched Jason walk down the street, disappearing into the crowd. He wanted to follow, to keep him safe, but he knew it wouldn't matter. Fate always found a way. The next morning, Nathaniel's phone buzzed with a text. From an unknown number, *, "This is Claire. Jason's sister. I don't know how to tell you this, but Jason, he passed away last night. Accident. I thought you should know." Nathaniel's hands went numb, the phone slipping onto the table. He sank into a chair, staring at nothing. The whisper echoed again, sharper now. "I wish I hadn't pushed her away." The weight crushed him. He had seen it coming, and he had done nothing. Because what could he do? What could he ever do? That night, Nathaniel sat in the dark, a bottle of whiskey open on the table. He wasn't much of a drinker, but the burn dulled the edges of his thoughts. He poured another glass, staring at the liquid like it might hold an answer. His mind drifted to Emily again, to her laugh, to her kids' tiny voices calling him Uncle Nat. What would he do if he heard her voice? What if the whisper came when she was near? He didn't think he could bear it. The room spun, the clock ticking too loud again. At some point, he fell asleep in the chair, haunted by dreams of whispers that never ended. The following weekend, he visited Emily, needing the warmth of family even if he couldn't explain why. She welcomed him with a smile, hugging him tight. The kids swarmed him with excitement, dragging him into games and laughter. For a few hours, he felt almost human again, but beneath the joy, fear gnawed at him. He found himself listening too hard, bracing for it. Every time Emily spoke, every time the kids ran by, he flinched inside, waiting for the whisper that might steal them from him. It didn't come. Not yet, but he knew it was only a matter of time, and the thought terrified him more than anything else in the world. The days that followed Jason's death bled together into a haze of sleepless nights and whispered regrets that weren't his own. Nathaniel stopped answering his phone. He stopped eating much. Every whisper felt like a reminder that he was powerless. He could hear the endings, but he couldn't stop them. Emily showed up one evening, unannounced, knocking on his door until he finally opened it. Her eyes widened when she saw him, unshaven, hollow, surrounded by empty glasses and crumpled papers. "Nat," she whispered, stepping inside, "what's happening to you?" He tried to brush her off, muttering excuses, but she wouldn't leave. She cleaned the table, made him coffee, sat across from him until finally, the silence cracked. "I hear them," he blurted. His voice shook. "I hear people's last thoughts. Before they die." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly that," he said, gripping his head. "I hear them. Strangers, friends, anyone. Their last words before death. And I can't stop it. I can't change it." His chest heaved. "I knew Jason was going to die. I heard him. And I did nothing." Emily stared at him, torn between disbelief and heartbreak. "Nat, you've been carrying this alone. What was I supposed to do?" His voice cracked. "Tell people. They'd think I was insane. And even if they believed me, what good would it do? I can't save them. I just hear them go." Emily reached across the table, taking his trembling hand. "You've always carried too much. Even when we were kids. But you're not alone, not anymore. Whatever this is, you don't have to face it by yourself." Her words steadied him, if only for a moment. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe he wasn't doomed to bear this curse alone, but fate wasn't done with him yet. The night was heavy with summer heat when it happened. Nathaniel sat with Emily and her kids, watching them play on the living room floor. For the first time in months, he felt something close to peace. Then it came, sharp, undeniable, slicing through the laughter. "Please let the kids remember me smiling." Nathaniel's blood ran cold. His eyes snapped to Emily. She was laughing, ruffling her daughter's hair, unaware of the storm that had just broken in her brother's mind. "No," Nathaniel whispered. His chest tightened, his vision blurring. "No, no, no," Emily looked up, confused. "Nat? What's wrong?" He stumbled to his feet, pacing, clutching his head as if he could squeeze the whisper out. But it echoed, relentless. Her last thought. It was hers. It was happening. He grabbed her shoulders, desperate. "Don't go out. Don't drive. Don't leave the house. Please. Promise me." Emily's face paled. "Nat, you're scaring me, promise me." His voice cracked, raw with terror. "I can't lose you. Please, Em. Don't go anywhere." The kids froze, watching wide-eyed. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she touched his face gently. "Nat, whatever's happening, we'll get through it. But you need to breathe. Okay? You need to." And then the sound of screeching tires outside split the air. Emily glanced toward the window instinctively. Nathaniel's heart stopped. He lunged, grabbing her, pulling her back, just as a car slammed into the front of the house. The wall shook, glass shattering, screams filling the night. When the dust cleared, Nathaniel realized the car had swerved, crashing into the yard instead of the living room. The driver stumbled out, dazed but alive. The children cried, clinging to Emily, and Emily was still there, in his arms. Breathing. Alive. Nathaniel's whole body shook as he held her, his tears soaking into her shoulder. The whisper had been real, but this time, he had changed it. Later, after the chaos settled and the police left, Emily sat with him on the porch. The kids were asleep upstairs, the house eerily quiet again. "You knew," she said softly. "It wasn't a question." Nathaniel stared at his hands. "I heard you. Your last thought. I thought I was too late." His voice broke. "But I wasn't." Emily placed her hand over his. "Maybe you're not cursed, Nat. Maybe you were given this for a reason. Not to save everyone, no one can do that, but to save the ones you can. To be there when it matters most." He looked at her, her eyes shining with conviction. For the first time, the weight on his chest lifted just slightly. He would still hear the whispers. He would still carry the regrets, the confessions, the fragments of lives ending around him. But maybe, just maybe, he wasn't powerless. Maybe sometimes, he could tip the scale, and even when he couldn't, he could make sure no one left this world unheard, forgotten, or alone. Nathaniel stood in the warm night air, listening to the hum of the city beyond. For the first time, the whispers felt less like a curse and more like a calling, and he knew, whatever final thoughts came next, he was ready.